Hello viewers, welcome to our program on immigration and legal affairs. I am your immigration attorney Michael Fulwani, and my partner David Nachman is still traveling and he will be on our future programs. And in the meantime, we have attorney Vernonique Malka, just like Malika. And briefly talking about her, introducing her, she is the managing lawyer of the Canadian Law Group of NPZ. NP is the law group of which I'm also a managing member, and also she deals with mostly with the Canadian cases. Am I right?
That's correct.
Okay. And now she has been doing Canadian immigration for the last 15 years, a long time.
Almost 20.
A lot of
but
experience.
Let's say 15.
Oh, wonderful.
Makes me
Okay.
younger.
And she is also licensed barrister and a solicitor in Ontario since 1995. And she is a foreign legal assistant, foreign legal consultant in New Jersey since 2006. So that means she also something to do with U.S. immigration law as well. Okay. Now she's based. Are you based mostly in Ontario?
I am based outside of Canada, which is unusual for Canadian immigration lawyers. I work out of the New Jersey and New York locations, but we do have offices in Canada if clients need.
Very good. So why don't we devote this entire program to Canadian immigration?
Okay.
Because I know a lot of our viewers ask the question, oh, I cannot get a green card here. Oh, there are a lot of years to wait here. Oh, I might have a deportation proceeding or some kind of crime, and a lot of issues, a lot of reasons for which even on a temporary visas, kind of a H-1B, or a person that can't stay more than 6 years, or whatever other reasons may be, or the wife. Another is an interesting thing. Recently, somebody says, I'm applying on an EB2 visa, for example, and the waiting period, or EB3 visa, so many years of time to wait, and I'm married now, my wife is there, I can't wait any longer. Maybe can I go to Canada and then my wife can join there? I say, maybe, but you're going to talk to a Canadian immigration lawyer, and I cannot render you any advice on the Canadian immigration. But these are some of the questions coming from our viewers. So why don't you give us a general scheme about the Canadian immigration law as it may apply to the people that are going to permanently live here, like our green card holders in the US, or those who come for a visit or a temporary work visas. How does the system work in Canada?
So thank you for introducing Canada so nicely. I think the first thing for the viewers to understand is that Canada is a wonderful alternative or a wonderful complement to a U.S. status. So people, like you said, Michael, who are in temporary status in the U.S., a status that's about to expire, or people who came on a valid temporary status and their status expired, are eligible for Canadian immigration. That means they can just go to Canada instead of going all the way home.
But they have to be eligible. Not everybody just can walk into Canada.
That's
right?
correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. So the first thing to understand philosophically is that Canada, unlike the US, welcomes immigrants very, very much. Welcomes, it's part of the fabric, cultural fabric of the country. 20% of Canadians are foreign born.
Why do you say unlike USA? We also in the US welcome them, but you know.
US immigration is viewed as a right. Canadian immigration is viewed as a value. This came out of a study in 2012, and it was published in an article in The Economist. And sociologists have done this study. So yes, immigrants are important everywhere. We know this. The countries would not function without immigrants. But it is part of a value system in Canada, which makes it that the immigration system is built differently.
Very interesting. So let's talk about the values.
Okay, the values are education, youth, English speaking, or French speaking.
Correct.
These are important values, and the basis of the Canadian immigration system is a points system, not a letter system.
Okay.
So the more a person will be speaking English and educated in English, the younger they are, the more work experience they have, the more education they have, the more points they will get. And that makes the country more attractive for them either if they're in U.S. or foreignly.
Okay, so let's go forward and talk about, let's say for a minute, let me become your client and I'm going to ask you, tell you my position and ask you how you can help me or how the Canadian laws can help me in getting a visa, maybe permanent or a temporary, to Canada. Okay, so my name is Mr. Patel. And as Mr. Patel, I owned a Dunkin' Donut store here, or maybe a 7-Eleven, or maybe a motel. I'm a one business, small business, and I'm not legally here. And it's a long time. They tell me the waiting time, if I start my green card now, maybe 8 years, 10 years, or whatever. Is there any way that I can go to Canada instead of going back to India?
Absolutely. As long as you came in here legally, Mr. Patel. If you are in the U.S. and you came in originally, let's say on an H-1 or an F-1, and that visa lapsed, you do have options. If you are have experience in the service, beverage, and food service industry, being an owner of 7-Eleven and so on, this is a profession in demand in Canada. And you should consider, if you really want to go quickly, finding a job in a province in Canada that needs food and beverage industry workers. There are provinces like this. Alberta, where the Olympic Games were hosted, is in severe shortage of that type of worker. If Mr. Patel then has a job offer from a Canadian employer, which he can probably get even without going to Canada, because there's such a demand. Oh. So you will send your resume on the websites, and you will get a phone call saying, we are interested. We see you have 7 years of experience serving beverages in a 7-Eleven or in a Dunkin' Donuts. We need this. You're a manager. You're a food and service beverage manager. That's an occupation in demand. We need you. How quickly can you come? That's usually the question. I need to secure a work permit for Canada. Then that's when you need to come see me, Mr. Patel, and that's when we will apply for your work permit. And if it's a profession in demand, it is usually a matter of time because it's easy to show there's a demand. Canada knows this. So we apply through the process. We show that there's nobody other Canadians. It takes 30 days to do that. And then you get your work permit in another 2 months. So 3 months, you're in Canada with your family, and your wife can get, or your husband, if it's the wife applying, can get an open work permit, which allows the person to work for any employer in Canada as a dependent.
Felicia Ben, as we call in Gujarati, it's a very good news. You are telling me in 2 months, 3 months?
Right.
Really?
As long as it's a profession in demand. If it's a saturated profession, or if you're applying in a place like Toronto where there's a lot of competition, that's not going to be as easy.
So even if I am here illegally in the US for many, many years,
yes,
that doesn't matter?
Okay. Again, what are you applying for? If you're applying for a work permit,
correct,
it is important to make a distinction between permanent and temporary status in
right.
Canada. If a person seeks a temporary status, the government will look at the residential history in other countries. If the person held an illegal temporary status in the United States, that will become relevant to the application in Canada. They'll say, oh, you overstayed your status in US? No. Then we don't want to give you a temporary status in Canada because we think you're going to overstay here too. However, if the person gets a job offer and that the employer is prepared to sponsor a permanent residence, right, permanent process, which often they are because they're so desperate for people, then the government will not give as much weight to the prior overstay in the US because it's a permanent process.
But for that, how much? You said 2-3 months for temporary
correct
visa, but for green card, how much time would that take? You have a green card system?
We have a PR, permanent residence card system.
Okay.
Currently, it's standing...
Same thing like we here,
yes,
the green card.
It's like the equivalent of a green card. Currently, the system stands at about 10 to 12 months, in some locations longer. It is being revamped. Right now, many of your viewers may know that, for example, the foreign skilled worker category has been frozen since June of last year. This is a very popular program. It is reopening, we understand from the minister, on May 4th in 2013, coming up very soon. Our office gets many calls from people now saying, how can I get prepared? I want to be first in line to apply under the new program. Well, I tell, certainly we help them get prepared if they need our help. But the first thing to do is to be ready to file when the system opens in May. This program will have a cap, a number of people in the first year that can apply from all over the world. So it's important to be prepared. It is foreign skilled workers are people with a high level of education. They are going to be people who have a 7 or more band score on a language test in English or French, and people who are also eligible based on their professions. There will be a list of professions. Used to be 29 professions. We understand there will be a list. We don't know how many professions will be on the list.
I'm very much interested because 2 months, no problem. May is around the corner and we can start the case now. But can you help me in getting that job offer from an employer in Canada, or do I have to do on my own?
This is something you have to do on your own. However, I can give you tips on where to look, how to present yourself. I'm a Canadian. I am a lawyer, but I'm also Canadian.
And you are a very kind person also, helping me so much in getting to Canada.
Well,
I really, really thank you for that.
You haven't gotten my bill yet.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that, let me go back to Michael Fulwani now. It's time for a short break. And right after the break, Mr. Shaw is going to come and ask you some questions. So stay tuned. We will be back. Welcome back, and once again we have Vernonique, Canadian immigration lawyer, and we are talking about Canadian immigration generally before the break, and she just interviewed her potential client, Mr. Patel then. Now you have a client, me, now I am Mr. Shaw. Now I came to US on an H-1 visa, and I have been working here, and my employer sponsored me for a green card, they say underemployment, third preference category. And that also does not helping me because my 6 years are employing, it's completing. That's a limit of 6 years of H-1B in the US. And I'm told that after June or July, I cannot continue to stay. And I cannot get further extensions because my labor certification application or petition was not pending for more than a year. In this scenario, I'm very much frustrated. What I'm thinking, while my immigration case is going on, I have to go in India, stay there until my number comes, or at least 1 year, if not more. Because after 1 year, if I go out and come back, I can still continue my H-1 for another 6 years. Now, I want to go only for at least 1 year, maybe more if I like Canada. Can I do it quickly? Because I don't have much time. I need to, if that can happen, if you can help me, I would like to go to Canada on a temporary visa.
In this factual scenario, Michael, that you laid out, you're talking about a 3-month window for the worker, Mr. Shaw, to leave the U.S. That's a little bit of a short window.
No problem, no problem. I'm told that even if I can stay a little longer, as long as I don't cross 160 days, that will be a problem for me for unlawful presence, 1 or 2 months. But would that matter with the Canadian immigration if I'm just overstayed for a few weeks or 2 weeks? Or
it might matter if you're looking for a job, a work permit in Canada. I would recommend that Mr. Shaw return to India at that point and let me help him from India come back to Canada temporarily.
That's very good. I have an idea. I think that during the last 6 years, I might have gone to India 4 or 5 months on a visit, and I can talk to my immigration lawyer. I'll talk to her whether she can get my extension about another 4 or 5 months. This way, we will have enough time to.
That's a little bit more time to work with, in which case I would suggest to Mr. Shaw you pursue both. There's a number of things he can do. The first thing to consider is look in your own backyard. Do you have an employer in the last let's say 5 years, 10 years, that has an office in Canada.
Okay, supposing, yeah, maybe it is, and then what?
Then let's move you temporarily on the equivalent of what into the US is an L.
Oh.
Let's move you on an intercompany transfer to Canada, temporary status into Canada, so you don't have to go back home.
That
you
is
can
very
stay
good.
there.
That's
and
it.
not
Yeah.
only that, you can bring your spouse and your children, and your spouse can have an open work permit. On a work permit, you will have all of the health benefits that Canadians have as well, which is free health care in Canada. Let's not forget this advantage. Social benefits as well. So a temporary status in Canada can be very good. If you decide you want to stay in Canada, it's possible you might not want to come back.
Oh my God.
But if you decide
okay.
you want to stay, there are then a number of immigration programs.
So my
pursue.
wife can also work and children can go to school and
That's
no
correct.
problems?
That's correct.
That's very nice in America on H4 visa. We will make that decision later on.
That's
but right now, please get me this temporary visa to come there.
It sounds like in this particular scenario we can do that. We can certainly apply for that for
Okay,
you.
thank you. Now, back to Michael Fulwani. So I want to ask you questions now about some problems that some people have, clients have, who have unlawful presence, who have prior deportation, or they might have committed some crimes. And how do those things affect? We talked a little bit about the unlawful presence, but what about the crimes? Because there are small crimes, we call it a misdemeanor here in the US. There are felonies, larger crimes. Is crime disbarred, or is a big hindrance or a problem in getting a Canadian temporary or a permanent visa?
Inadmissibility issues in Canada are an issue, okay? If a person has criminality, committed an act, a criminal act in the US or elsewhere, this has to be disclosed. But it doesn't mean that the person cannot immigrate to Canada. There's a separate application that has to be made called a rehabilitation application, depending on when the offense was committed. If it was over 5 years since the completion of the sentence, then there's a process called deemed rehabilitation. The person may be eligible for deemed rehabilitation, which is a way of saying you apply to have it erased, to clear the path. If it has been less than 5 years since the completion of the sentence, you must apply for a rehabilitation, which means the government has to analyze your sentence, your offense, and decide whether to give you rehabilitation or not. Every case is different and depends on the facts of the case.
So if the client has a criminal background, he needs to give you all the record of the crime, of the punishment, of the rehabilitation, and you can do some
Correct.
analysis and kind of give an opinion what you think,
Correct.
how the Canadian government may look at that,
That's
and
correct.
maybe a smaller problem, big problem, or a no problem.
That's correct. That's exactly correct. We apply Canadian criminal law to the analysis. So that's why you need to be a Canadian lawyer to do that.
Okay. Now let's talk about the